Every empire has its peak. A golden age kick-started by a move where they outmaneuvered everyone else. For the Spanish, this was undoubtedly the 16th century. The French completely dominated the 17th. Britain built an empire where the sun never set for the whole 1800s. And the peak of the Russian Empire was by far the 18th century. Peter the Great stole the great power seat from Sweden and modernized every aspect of the Russian Bear. Then Cathrine the Great took it to the next level. Culturally, politically, militarily, this is when Russia really became a major player. Yet there was one feat they failed to pull off. The so-called Greek Plan. One that aimed at restoring the Byzantine Empire. Yeah, this was originally an idea I had for the dumb scenarios list, but the closer I looked, the less dumb it seemed. Oftentimes, I have to follow breadcrumbs to build the bigger picture, but here, we have a year-long correspondence between Russia and Austria, where they discuss who wants what and the exact borders of this newly carved-out state after partitioning the Ottoman Empire. They even had a moderate and extreme proposal on the table, depending on how well the war went. We know the how, the when, the why, and who would rule the restored Byzantines. Catherine was even prepping her young grandson, appropriately named Constantine, to be the future leader of this restored empire. You could say all these ingredients made for a pretty interesting scenario. Music to my ears. But how would I listen to this music? Simple. Raycon. Speaking of music, this video was sponsored by Raycon. Raycon's everyday earbuds provide you with great audio anywhere you go, be it the gym, at work, or in my case, when you go to sleep. Yeah, I sleep with my Raycons in. Actually, I just sleep with one Raycon in. I like to fall asleep to paleontology videos, okay? It's better than leaving the TV on. I'm someone that either needs a fan to fall asleep or a guy talking about extinct animals. As far as earbuds go, Raycons are just affordable and accessible. Like, they start off at half the price of the competition. They come in a bunch of different colors. I got mine in blue and had it come with this protective cover that looks like the ocean. I got really into early 2000s water levels for some reason. Don't ask. They have a good battery life. 32 hours. Like, I've woken up to my earbuds still playing whatever YouTube auto-played. Sometimes right before I go to bed, I remember that I forgot to charge them. So I just put them in the case, and it only takes like 10 minutes for 90 minutes of battery life. I don't know. I like them. I use these things every night. This is now a problem for me. And if you want it to be a problem for you too, go to buyraycon.com/althist, 20% off the best-selling everyday earbuds. While you're there, check out all their other discounted products during their March Mayhem sale. Anyway, back to Byzantium. But Cody, the Romans never called it Byzantium. Yeah, I know, but it made for a pretty good segue. Not anymore, because you ruined it. Thanks, Jimmy. Okay, so what happened? How was this proposal put on the table in the first place? More importantly, why didn't it happen? Well, for that we need some context. There were a lot of interesting things that went on in the 18th century, but I don't care about any of those. I only care about America's independence, baby. While Washington was crossing the Delaware, Catherine the Great was in charge of Russia. King George formally requested that she send 20,000 troops to America, and the Russian Navy too, to fight against France and Spain. But she just refused. She didn't care. Why would she care about America? That place with like 5 people, and some corn. Oh no, she wanted something bigger, something older. She wanted Constantinople. When Catherine usurped the throne from her husband in 762, Russia's 2 historic rivals were already subdued. Peter the Great won the Northern War against Sweden, while the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth fell prey to the very thing that made it unique. As an elective monarchy, outside forces could and did exert influence over its elections, so the PLC's downfall was ushered in through diplomacy. Eventually, it suffered its first partition in 1772. Next were the Ottomans, who were also a victim of their greatest strength, the Janissaries. Since they were considered some of the most fearsome troops in the world, they used that leverage to gain significant privileges, destabilizing the Porta in the process. When its Sultan Abdul Hamid ascended the Ottoman, he inherited a losing war against the Russians, and was forced to concede significant territories. Having spent most of his life in a luxurious prison, he was a pacifist, more focused on domestic affairs. Had he come around earlier, maybe he would have made a difference. But he was too late, and the wrong guy to be in charge of the largest army in Europe. In that same war, the Russians mopped the floor with the Ottomans on land and sea. Unlike the pathetic attempt to send a navy to Japan, this expedition was extremely successful in destroying the Ottomans. The Russian navy didn't just raid coastal cities, they incited a rebellion in the Levant, Egypt, and most importantly, southern Greece. At the war's end, the treaty solidified Catherine as the protector of all Christian subjects in the Ottoman Empire. This was a time when Greek influence exploded in Russia. Influence is kind of an understatement. Catherine was obsessed with the ancient Greeks and Romans. Russia's push south into Tatar Crimea was seen as reclaiming land once populated by the Greek colonies, and the new city names reflected that, as they were given Greek names. Kherson, Mariupol, Sevastopol, and most notably Kajibe was renamed Odessa after the Odyssey. This was just a little hint at Russia's far more ambitious plans. Catherine wanted to restore the Byzantine Empire. Or well, the Greek Empire as she called it. Yes, this was real. I'm not going to go through the entire thing because Romaboo Ramblings has a great video on the subject. You just watch that video. He details everything about the period. I'll wait even. Okay?
Thanks for the introduction, Cody. If any of you doubt that Catherine was serious about this plan, just think about the fact that she made her grandson LARP as the reincarnation of Constantine XI since he was a baby. All Greek tutors, Greek kids for childhood friends, and even a Greek wet nurse to absorb more Greekness with her milk.
You back? Alright, so at the end, he kind of briefly speculated what this alternate Greek empire might have been like if Russia succeeded. His channel, though, isn't about all that alternate history garbage, so he didn't go too much into it. I, however, do specialize in that alternate history garbage. So hey, let's theorize. What if Russia defeated the Ottomans so badly, they were able to establish a new Greek empire? Catherine knew that if the balance of power was going to be disturbed, she needed allies. So the Tsarina turned to the Empire of Austria, which was eager to reclaim some of its land in the Balkans. One thing that really helps with this scenario is that there were just full plans and discussions about potential borders carving up the Balkans. Makes my job a lot easier. This correspondence between the Russians and Austrians outlined a plan for a new Greek empire. One that would be politically neutral under Catherine's son Constantine. No, that was not a coincidence. A buffer state called Dacia, corresponding with modern-day Romania. And Austria would receive all of the Western Balkans. Only problem here was that Emperor Joseph was kind of an idiot. He demanded way too much land. Real amateur stuff. His border was just a straight line through the Balkans. Habsburgs, I swear to God. The Russians were just bewildered by the whole thing, and kind of put the project on ice. I don't know, maybe Catherine was just so annoyed she decided to kick the can down the road until the war was over. Let the diplomats deal with Emperor Joseph's dumbass. The funniest thing is that once the war did happen, Austria immediately screwed it up. Like, there was a battle the Austrians fought and lost against themselves. There were no Turks. Somehow two Austrian armies ran into each other, fought a battle, and the casualties ranged from between 150 to 10,000. As a history nerd, I kind of doubt that 10,000 number, but as a YouTube channel, I'm just gonna say it's true because that's really funny. Halfway through the war, Joseph II dropped dead, and the Empire peaced out. Once again, Habsburgs, I swear to God. Despite its Italian-level ally, Russia carried the war. They battered the Ottomans. Yet, the Greek plan was dead in the water. By the time it was all over in 1791, Europe had moved on to more important matters. like complete societal collapse. What a shame we never got to see whatever this Greek Empire thing was. How could things have gone differently? How do we even make this alternate scenario happen? It's simple. We kill Emperor Joseph. That came out a little too strong. How about he dies? Naturally. Just a little earlier. Like, come on, it was the 18th century. The Holy Roman Emperor of all people died of tuberculosis at the age of 48. This was just a thing that happened. So, let's have TB claim Joseph in 1780, instead of 10 years later, when it'd be very inconvenient for our little Byzantine LARPing session. The secret meeting between the Empress and new Emperor would still be carried out, and the following year, this military alliance is confirmed, just like in our timeline. The key difference here is that the Russians were offering Austria an incredible deal, and Leopold, who needed to start off his reign with a bang, would not haggle, or you know, draw a stupid straight line. In this alternate timeline, the year is 1782. The Second Russo-Turkish War still happens, just 5 years earlier. The Austrians, while not as incompetent, still fail to make significant gains. But that's irrelevant, because Russia has all the aces it needs. Predictions here are relatively easy, because the events would go fairly similarly to the war in our timeline, where once again Admiral Yushakov would be faced with a far larger Ottoman fleet, and once again he would sink them to the bottom of the sea. When entering the service of the Russian Navy, Cathrine remarked that John Paul Jones would get to Constantinople. The plan was there, and it couldn't be stopped by land or sea. But it did get stopped by timing. In this alternate world, without worrying about Britain and Prussia, because America and France hadn't imploded yet, Cathrine could go all out on the Turks. The advance against the 300,000 strong Ottoman army is slow. Fortified citadels are hard to take, and the supply lines stretch far and over the treacherous terrain of the Balkans. Even with naval superiority, the campaign is difficult, but bit by bit, village by village, the lands of Moldavia and Wallachia are taken. Assisted by the barrage of its ships of the line, the Danube fortresses also fall, and Russian troops descend upon Bulgaria. From there, the march on Constantinople is easy and inevitable. It took the Tsardom 4 years to approach its victory point, and no more than half a year more to finish the job. Here that lines up to 1787, 2 years before the French Revolution even started. At this point, Britain is still licking its wounds, and it's only a year since the death of Frederick the Great. No one would be in a position to tell the Austro-Russian alliance to back down, and Abdul Hamid would be in no position to save Constantinople. Updated tactics, incredible leadership, an experienced army, and one very determined Tsarina, and you have the Greek plan becoming a reality. For the first time since 1453, Constantinople falls, but it falls back into Orthodox hands. The war is over, but oh boy, the headache has just begun. In his video about this, Romaboo Ramblings briefly suggested that Cathrine might have put Roman aesthetic over actual Roman policy. This wasn't the return of some true Eastern Roman Empire, at least not in actual governance. How could it? But even then, Cathrine only thought about the romanticized version of this Greek resurgence. He imagined that this would be an enlightened despot state, something very in character for Cathrine. I like that. I want to use that as the starting off point here. In this alternate world, with the Russians taking Constantinople and both powers agreeing to the terms, this new Greek Empire is declared to the world, much to the confusion of really everyone. Now, I'm sure the Christians under Ottoman rule would be very happy to be rid of them, but also, they might wonder why this empire took its place, especially one with this vibe. So, as an example, I like to think that this would be like the parade for the opening of the Cologne Cathedral. Yeah, this cathedral is not a few hundred years old, it was finished in the 19th century. The parade was a succession of period-appropriate costumes. Knights and kings, queens and peasants, all going through the 600 years it took to build the thing. Look how much Germany had changed. The parade led up to this representation of Germania. In a way, it was kind of cementing the new German Empire as this final step in German history. I don't know, maybe Catherine would do something similar. I could see it. This, though, isn't some empire or restoration by the people themselves. This is an outside force, even if orthodox, willing a new empire onto multiple foreign people. What I love about this batshit idea is that it's something that's never really happened before in Western history. One empire building up a separate empire from scratch, all as a big LARP. The Greek Empire's biggest hurdle would be to legitimize itself to the Greeks. It would have to show itself as an official continuation of Rome, something that none of these people ever would have seen. Imagine being a peasant in this world. Like, you and your village have been controlled by the Turks for generations, that's all you know. Then suddenly, the Turks are gone, and you're now controlled by a new empire. Now, from an Orthodox perspective, this new empire wouldn't be a complete fraud. Like, Russia had already considered itself the third Rome by this point, after the fall of the Byzantines. So who best to legitimize Eastern Rome than the third Rome? Religiously, this might fly. In long-term practice, though, that's a different story. Like, imagine if today, the United States fell, conquered by another country, ruled by that country for centuries, and then, sometime in the future, this land is liberated by robots. And the robots love the idea of America, so much so they found a new one. But this new nation isn't anything like the old United States. It doesn't have 3 branches, there's no president, it's not even a democracy. This is a state controlled by robots. Everything's controlled by robots. This has nothing in common with the old United States, in both government and culture. They even got the name wrong. They called it the America States for some reason. These robots don't care about what America was like before it fell. And they don't care about what Americans are like in the future. These robots just really like the aesthetics of the founding fathers. So they dress up in powdered wigs and have muskets. They think America is Davy Crockett, and that's it. Everyone has to pretend that American history never changed since 1776. That's the Greek Empire. The Greek Empire begins with the crowning of Catherine's son Constantine, beginning this whole experiment. Wasn't meant to be an experiment, but Catherine has to find out the hard way. The biggest threat here for the Greek Empire and Russia isn't losing Constantinople again to the Turks. I don't imagine the Russians will ever let the Turks take Constantinople again. Like, ever. Even in Soviet times, this city is staying. The stability of the Balkans in general is a whole other question. Few questions here, really. One, who would be the ruling elite of this new empire? Not just Constantine, but those that surround him. Would minor Greek and Christian landowners be elevated into a new aristocratic class? Would Russia import their own nobles? Who's to say? As much as Catherine told the Austrians that the Greek Empire would always be neutral in European affairs, I mean, come on. The only way such a project would work so quickly was if it imported Russian bureaucracy, and really, a Russian mentality. As you might imagine, if you're going to invent a new empire from the ground up, you're going to import your own ideas about what a good empire is. As in, your own. All of that without really caring much about the current groups already living there. That might cause some issues. Catherine probably didn't care too much about how the Balkans had changed. Even in Greece alone, the cultural epicenter was now in Morea, not Athens or Pella. The centuries of Ottoman rule had led to free movement within the empire, creating the biggest demographic change/mess Europe had ever seen. What was once the Eastern Roman Empire 3 centuries earlier was now Balkan Swiss cheese. Ethnic maps were an absolute mess. So this Empire of Greece wouldn't just be made up of Greeks. It'd have a lot of Bulgarians, Serbs, Albanians, and maybe even Turks. That's fine. This is an empire after all, not a nation-state. The issues of nationalism is something for the next century to deal with. The main issue right now would be faith. Catherine was the protector of all Orthodox Christians after all, and just reclaimed the birthplace of Orthodoxy. She'd now control land that had been under Islamic rule for centuries, along with some of its customs. One immediate effect is that the Muslims here would face some, reprisals after centuries of Ottoman rule. Would it be by citizen militias or by the new state itself? Take your pick. The people living in these lands identified with their religion and their village, so it would be hard to make them immediately identify with this new empire. Hell, even then, this is the Balkans. Trying to create any cohesion, even between the same groups, is still like wrangling cats. The Russians pretty much spend years inserting themselves into a political world they have no real history with. This was all fine when it was about protecting Orthodox Christianity, but how well does this work when they have to balance the interests of all of these groups? Who wins? Who loses? Which noble gets what? Is the Greek Empire truly an empire that prioritizes Greeks, or is that just a name? If it does prioritize Greeks, that's gonna be an issue. Catherine's romanticized Roman dream smacks against harsh reality, and she would be stuck trying to impose a regency on a land 2,000 miles away. But Russia was no stranger to dealing with these kind of problems. Catherine in particular had a speciality in brutal Russification, which she applied in Poland and Ukraine respectively. The people in the Balkans would have to learn quick that the Russians carried a short leash. Here's the thing. This video isn't going to end with saying the Greek Empire would collapse immediately. 1, that's not fun, and 2, it probably wouldn't, for at least a while. It's not a strong empire by any means, and really it would just be a punchline for the rest of Europe, but it would still exist. In theory. Despite being an empire, it wouldn't really be that strong, even within its own lands. One thing that would be an immediate headache for the Russians and the Greek Imperials would be the Kleps and the Armatoloi. Mountain bandits, basically. Kleps raided and stole from everyone, and the Armatoloi were paid to fight the Kleps by the Ottomans. These were usually the same exact people that would just change allegiances depending on where the money was coming from. In our timeline during the Greek War of Independence, the Kleps were instrumental in fighting against the Turks. They kind of became folk heroes in a way. But in this alternate scenario, there are frankly no more Turks to fight. There would be, though, this new, odd, Greek empire. Now, Kleps fought everything, even other Greeks, even each other. The main thing they loved was autonomy in the hills and controlling themselves. So, just to guess, I imagine that the Kleps would not get along too well with the Greek Empire authorities. This is really just embarrassing. The supposed cultural center of the empire isn't even really controlled by the empire. So what could be done about this? Nothing. It's like southern Italy and the Mafia. Yeah, the Kingdom of Italy exists, but we know who's really in charge of Sicily. The Empire would mainly control all the coastal regions and cities. Even then, who's to say for how long? I imagine there would be a honeymoon period where the Ottomans are gone, but once that begins to wear off, the cracks in this whole artificial empire begin to show. In our timeline, Greece's first king Otto was imported from Germany, ruled for like 30 years, and was chased off. He just clashed too much with the real Greek population. Would Constantine do the same? As he grew, what type of ruler would he be? Well, luckily for us, Constantine did grow up in our timeline. While he would have been a child when he was crowned, and would have grown up in a whole different environment, by the time he took the throne in this alternate world, perhaps there's still something we can gauge from his overall real personality. So how was Constantine in our timeline? Terrible. He was terrible. He may have never ruled Greece, but in our history, he did rule Poland, and Constantine was considered a tyrant. I'm going off this book, God's Playground by Norman Davies, but Constantine, by all accounts, kind of reminds me of Joffrey. Like, he did some really messed up stuff to women, he was hated by everyone, and there was an uprising. I guess if we want, we can debate the whole nature versus nurture thing, and if he was in a different environment, maybe he would have turned out different, but I don't know. I feel like if this guy was an independent emperor, he probably would have been worse. Would there really be a difference between being the despot of a Russia-ruled Poland and the despot of a Russia-allied Greece? I can't say. But I can't imagine this guy would inspire many of his subjects in the way that Catherine had hoped. This is assuming that his reign even survives until adulthood. Would it? If you want to find out, you know the deal. Vote for a second part. Honestly, please do. I like the scenario. A lot more than I thought. It's just unraveling for me. What would the rest of Europe even do? How would this change the balance of power? How might Britain and France deal with Russia in the future? Will the Greek Empire be anything more than a laughingstock? Who can say? Find out in the next exciting adventures of the Balkans. Once again, special thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Go to buyraycon.com/althis to get up to 20% off the everyday earbuds. That's buyraycon.com/althis.